stories will often end, and then he attained enlightenment, as if there were something there to attain. We also hear the teaching that that is not the case. It is not attained. Um, it is already there. Sometimes we get that. The story of the Buddha's first awakening is that when he saw the morning star, he said, "Behold, all beings are enlightened exactly as they are." So there's nothing to attain because you already have it. And then it's not to be attained and had, it's the continually unfolding. And so we have Dogen saying, the practice is the enlightenment. Um, and that's uh, and that's the particular perspective that I'm coming from today. Now, yesterday I was made an assistant teacher, and becoming an assistant teacher or receiving Jukai or becoming a teacher or Dharma transmission, that kind of is an attainment. People said, "Congratulations," and that's not inappropriate. No one said condolences, but that also would not have been inappropriate. But that's institutional stuff. And we need the institutions. The institutions are the embodiment of our compassion. We create Zen centers. We set up structures of practice within those Zen centers. We have sutras that we recite, and the bowing, and the candles, and the flowers. And all of that is a structure of institution so that people can be shown how, so that we can invite people to follow this path, and so that we can keep them company. And we have designated teachers to be there, more or less reliable guides along that path. It's helpful to have guides, but none of that is the path itself. The path itself has nothing to do with accomplishment or attainment, but only with being on the path. The path itself is a continual process of peeling back layers of delusion. And when I say peeling back layers of delusion, the image that I would call to mind is not one of an infinitely sized onion, that you are peeling back the layers of an infinite onion and you're getting closer and closer to the center, but there's still an infinite. In fact, if it's an infinite onion, you're not even getting closer to the center, because no matter how many layers you peel back, there's still an infinite amount still to go. So you can't even, in any sense, say you're getting closer. And everyone's crying. Right. Well, that's if you're trying to cut the onion. If you just peel the layers, it's not so tearful. It's the cutting stuff that gets. I'm going to suggest a different image, one that came to me as I was just thinking about today's talk, and that's of a sliding glass door. Sometimes we need to close the door and be protected from the elements. We have various protective strategies, and sometimes we need to close that door, and sometimes we can open it and let the fresh breeze come in, and that's very nice. But then we're a little more exposed when we do that. Only this particular glass door, as soon as it closes, instantaneously starts to crust over. And so the practice is one of continually coming back and chipping away the crust so that we can open it again. And that's the point that I'm going to be making in coming at from a couple different angles today. And the first angle is to go back to the Four Noble Truths in the way that we said them in the ceremony yesterday. The first one is life contains the seeds of suffering. The second is suffering is caused by attachment. And that's a lovely way to put it. I really appreciate that the first one says seeds of suffering, and the second one says suffering itself. And there's a difference. Life contains the seeds of suffering. That in the original is what dukkha. That's a fairly good translation of what dukkha is. Not suffering, but the seeds of suffering. Because in the Dhammacakkappavattana, the Buddha says that dukkha is birth, old age, sickness, death, having things we don't like, losing things we do like. None of that has to be suffering. Birth happens, we get old, we can be fairly relaxed about that, or we can react against that. And it's the reacting against it saying, oh, I don't want to lose what I liked. I don't want this thing that I don't like. It's the reactivity that is being spoken of in number two. Suffering is caused by attachment. Um, in the original, the first noble truth is dukkha, but the second noble truth is dukkha samudaya, the dukkha arising. And sometimes that's, I think, misunderstood as the arising of dukkha. But actually, it's what arises from dukkha. It's that seed sprouting. The seed sprouts into suffering when there's attachment, when there's reactivity. Now, of course, we can have preferences, but preferences aren't attachments. Yeah, I like that. The difference between a preference and attachment is sort of what do you do if you don't get it? If you don't get it, are you upset? If you're upset when you don't get your preference, that means it was an attachment, not just a preference. If it's a preference, if yeah, I'll take that one. Oh, you're out of that one? Well, never mind then. I'll take this one. And you're okay with just adjusting to that reality of today, I'm not going to get the one I would have preferred. Um, Reactivity happens, in other words, when our should energy, what should be, runs afoul of what is. And that's a kind of delusion, see, because should has no reality. Look around the room. You don't see a should anywhere. You don't smell a should. You don't hear a should. You can't feel a should. It has no reality. It's a kind of delusion, a fabrication of the mind. So truth will clear up the delusion. The clearing up the delusion will loosen our attachment. And with loosened attachment, that prevents the seeds of suffering from becoming sprouted suffering. But do we really want to know the truth? And that's where I'm going here, is all the ways that we hide it from ourselves. So I just finished reading, just this morning, I finished reading a book by Mark Lilla called Ignorance and Bliss on Wanting Not to Know, in which he talks about the various ways that the human brain kind of wants or sometimes maybe needs to not know things. I love this quote that Lilla has from A.E. Housman. The faintest of all human passions is love of truth. Of all the things we have, the faintest of all human passions. Now, um, when I talk about not knowing in this way, um, I need to distinguish that from, say, the slogan of the great Korean master Sing Sun, who said, only don't know. That was his slogan. But he didn't mean don't learn stuff. I think he meant, first, don't hold any learning as certain or complete. And second, be open to each moment, always open to whatever it may be teaching, because knowledge can become something that we use as a dismissive technique. Something that's just too familiar closes us down to the wonder of it. I see this with birders who pay no attention to that blue jay over there. It's just too common. But a Kirkland's warbler, wow, that's really something, and that's full of wonder for them. Well, Sang-san, when he says only don't know, is urging us to see the wonder in everything, the blue jays as well as the Kirkland's warbler. So I'm talking about a different kind of knowledge, or Mark Lilla, I think, is talking about a different kind of knowing when he says sometimes we need to not. There are some things we don't want to learn about. Um, parents to be, for instance, might tell the ultrasound technician not to show them the gender results. They'd rather not know until the child is born. Now, people are different in that regard, but that's a reasonable thing. You might decide it's more fun to not know until the birth. Or suppose you come from a family that has a high risk of developing an incurable hereditary disorder that manifests late in life, causes extraordinary pain and mental deterioration, and is always fatal. Would you want to know whether you had that particular genetic part or not? Um, Many people wouldn't want to know that. Some people would. But it seems to me a perfectly reasonable choice to say, I'd rather not know. That's not deciding to just be blind for blindness' sake. In some cases, a positive illusion is good for us. Some research shows that for certain illnesses, rates of longevity and survival are improved if doctors give a more optimistic diagnosis than might be warranted statistically. It just helps people have this positive illusion, which is an encouraging thing. They live a better life that way. But that's a fairly limited outcome. Uh, People with depressive realism, that's what the psychologists call it, depressive realism. These are people who are inclined to a dark view of life. They usually expect the worst. For depressive realists, they tend to make better medical decisions once they are told the bad news. Sort of like, yeah, it's what I was expecting anyway, and they're completely ready for it. And so they make pretty good. So for them, they don't need the positive illusion, and it doesn't work to try to give it to them. And an overly optimistic diagnosis can lead to not seeking out knowledge about their illness. It can lead to a greater likelihood of engaging in risky behavior that might hasten death. So there's limits on how good for you a positive illusion might be. It's a sort of sometimes for some personalities thing. But we do protect, for instance, we protect our kids from kinds of knowledge we think that they aren't ready for. Um, we don't want them to watch movies that are explicitly sexual or have violence in them. Um, and and I guess that's because we understand that they are at a highly imitative part of life. What they see, they're going to want to imitate. And they really shouldn't be trying to imitate those things at the age that they are. And so we protect them from that sort of knowledge. The thing is, we also do that for ourselves. Um, we teach ourselves not to know certain things. Part of this is being polite. I don't need to know that. It's none of my business. It helps us keep our nose out of other people's business to train ourselves. I don't want to know that. That's too much information. That's how we keep ourselves from being incurable gossips about other people's business. We prefer not to know. We'll take care of our business. Thank you very much. And that's none of mine. Not my circus, not my monkeys was, was an expression that a friend of mine used to have. And there's a certain kind of knowledge that we arrive at through calculation. But there are limits to how calculating or conniving we might want to be. So we prefer to block off some of that access to what would be strategic or instrumental knowledge. But deeper than that, there's the simple fact that in order to become a self, we have to learn to hide our true nature. Our true nature is there isn't any self. And to become a self in this world, which we have to do, there's a certain imposition of deciding not to know so that we can function better. I'm reminded that every time we recall a memory, we change it. I that, that's my understanding that that's what we've found. Um, this makes sense, I think, because whenever you recall a memory, it's because your mind has said, this situation is similar to something else I knew about once. There's some reason for recalling that memory. You recall it because you're in a situation where that past memory might be handy. So now you're applying that memory from another situation to this situation at hand. And that, of course, that alters the memory itself because now the memory has been bent just a little bit to be the kind of memory that applies to this slightly different, at least slightly different situation. Every time we recall a memory, the context in which you're recalling it is folded into that memory. So it's changed. But to apply that same principle, every insight about ourselves that we gain through this practice, sitting on the cushion, trying to live in a more mindful way, every insight about ourselves we gain is very soon appropriated by our delusive demons, by our ego. It's incorporated into our defensive structure. Every piercing of the veil becomes an experience, which is then woven into a new veil. So there can be no static truth to have and to hold and to know. There can be no static truth to have and to hold and to know. There can only be the ongoing process of peeling back the layers, getting to the raw skin, which then calluses over, and yet differently than it was before, but yet still a callus that must be peeled away again. Or every time we close the door, we have to chip away the incrustations to open it back up again. So our task, thus, is transformation, and it's ongoing transformation, continually piercing evil's new disguises, where in this case, evil is self-deception, the ways that we are fooled. Every time we get an insight and we think we've got it, we think if you've got something, well, you get maybe a minute to celebrate that. And then there's the task of getting to work to see through the next one, always regrowing and always needing to be peeled back. And so the task is ongoing transformation. And that's why Dogen says the practice is the enlightenment. That's, there's nothing to attain. There's the ongoing process of peeling back the delusions as they arise and watching them arise again. Thank you.